Hey y'all, Daniel Aaron here, your guide to vibrant living. And first of all, fair is fair. This is a tribute both to one of my coaches who gave me this assignment, I'll tell you about that in a minute, and two, to all of my beloved clients and students whom I have given hundreds and thousands of assignments, some of which were scary or unappealing. And I had just the great blessing yesterday of working with one who had just completed an assignment. He said, yeah, it was kind of hard and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, but happily, I trusted in you and it was really valuable. So I too trust in my coach. And the assignment is to share some stories. I've been on a kick with doing Facebook Live mini sessions. So now I'm going to play around with it for a short while with, instead of more direct kind of teachings in short form, I know we're all busy, I'm going to share with you a couple of stories, just today one, that will illuminate and hopefully, more importantly, entertain you. All right. And if I were you, which I am, of course, in the cosmic sense, I would be listening to this story not so much as, well, let me put it this way. Listen, I encourage you, I invite you to listen to this story as, what has this got to do with me? What has this got to do with you? You won't have had the same experience, and yet there will be some commonalities with your life and experience, and you might be curious, why am I telling you this particular story? Suppose I gave you some hints already. All right. Back in time, and I love this one too, because I'm in the process right now of finishing up, I'd say my first book, but my first real book that's going to publication. And it goes back in some ways to this story. And it was 1994 or so. I was living in Amherst, Massachusetts, and I was there specifically, intentionally, for three reasons. One, it was relatively close to where my mother was and her health wasn't so good. Two, 5 universities in that area. I thought it would be a great place to develop my writing, to work on my writing. I was doing that a lot. And 3, I was really into judo at that time, and there were some great clubs around there. So here I am, working on writing. That's what I was doing all day, and I was, just, doing anything I could to get by financially, to keep so that I had time, and I had no money back then. I was even some part of that collecting unemployment. That's a whole nother story, which is not something I'd be thrilled to do now, and at the time it fit. Okay, so shoveling driveways, childcare, whatever I could do to keep myself out of a full-time job so I could be working on my writing. And one day, this was during semester break, just after Christmas, and all the kids had left for, the college kids had left, and Amherst University of Massachusetts was there, so it was really quiet in town. And so I went to my favorite bookstore right on the corner there. I think it was called Atticus. And, well, I didn't have enough money to buy the book I wanted, Poets and Writers. There was a very friendly store, and they were relaxed about things, so I just sat down in there on the floor one day, and I was kind of looking through the book, and then there was this interview in the back. So I started reading the interview, and I really liked it. I don't even remember anything about the content of it now, but it was a great interview with a famous writer who I'd never heard of. Read the whole interview, and I felt really inspired and excited, and then when I got to the back, of course there's a bio about the writer. His name is John Edgar Wideman. He had won, what was that prize? Anyway, he had won a prestigious writing prize, and he was teaching at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. So when I completed reading it and saw that, I took that as a sign. I thought, you know what? And I just got a vision, and I made a decision that I was going to study with him and learn with him. So How I was going to do that, I don't know. Anyway, I went home and I was talking with my roommates. I lived in this cool co-op house, and one of my roommates had been involved with the university, and he said, yeah, you know what, you can take classes there. It's actually not that expensive for one class. Like a 3 credit class is maybe $900, which relative to, the cost of 1 year of college education is not so much. Of course, for me at the time, $900 was like 3 months rent. It was a big deal. And I didn't have it. I firmly believe, I believed it then and I believe it now, if we really want something, if it's in divine order, we will find a way to make the money part work, right? It's never really a good excuse, and I offer that to you and for myself. So, anyway, my friend told me what to do. He's like, you got to go to the department where the class is, and then you can register for the class. I'm like, cool, that sounds easy. So a couple days before the semester begins, I drive my little shitbox of a car over to the university. Now, mind you, I can sort of joke about the fact that I didn't have any money now. Back then, it was, I felt, what would be the opposite of courage? I was a bit ashamed, really. I was ashamed. I felt inadequate. Like, what's wrong? Even though I was doing it intentionally, and there was a part of me that saw, total projection, these university kids as being well off, and they were in, and I kind of felt like, what am I doing with my life? This is one of the stories as well, and I'm out of college, and I'm here in this university town, I don't have any money. Kind of felt like, I'm a kid from the other side of the tracks, and had all these stories going on in my head. And I get to the university, and it's massive. If you've, it's one of those just huge universities, and I'd driven through the campus many times, though it just all seemed like a maze to me. And in any case, finally found where to park, and then it was like 15 minutes of navigating to find where the graduate English department was. Finally get there, and I walk into the office, and the very nice woman comes up to me and says, "Can I help you?" And I say, "Yes, I would like to register for Dr. Weidman's advanced writing seminar." Something was called that, workshop, fiction workshop. And I had been working diligently on my writing for quite a while, for a few years, and anyway. So she looked at me a little puzzled, and she said, "Well, are you an MFA student?" And if I had inadequacy stories going on already, which I did, they got worse because I had no idea what MFA meant. No idea. And I know now, and it means Masters of Fine Arts. So she said, "Are you an MFA student?" I didn't know what it meant, but I figured that probably meant that I wasn't, so I said no. And then she looked at me and she did one of those kind of laughs like that, which, when she did that, I kind of, it just boom, cut right into me. Like, she just laughed at me. I'm laughable, pathetic. So I felt hurt, and of course I wasn't so aware of the hurt, so I got angry at that. And she must have seen, I don't hide emotions that well on my face, she must have seen the whole thing. And then so she kind of pulled back and she said, "Okay, well, here's how it works. You can go to the first class and you bring in a sample of your writing, and if Dr. Weidman believes your writing is of the quality for the class, then he could allow you into the class." So I hear all this, and my hopes are kind of going down like this, but I'm also mad, so I got some drive. And then then there was a certain kindness in her. She says, "But I wouldn't get your hopes up." I already knew that. I don't get my hopes up. And so she tells me, all right. So I got my plan. I go home, and I get out of all the stories I'd been working on, the one that I felt like was probably my best foot forward, and work on it a little bit more. The first class is in a few days. I go to the first class, and unfortunately it wasn't in the same building where the English department was, and it took me another bumbly kid from the other side of the tracks process to find it. going all over the campus. Excuse me, where's such and such building? I felt like such a loser. And finally get there, and then it's this big building, and then I finally find the classroom, and I look in the little window of the door, and Dr. Weidman's in there teaching, and it's only like about 10 people in the class, and they're all sitting there. So what to do? I walk in, and I'm probably 3 minutes late at this point, which I don't like to be late, and especially for something like that. And I kid you not, I walk in, literally, I open the door, and he kind of glances at me as he's saying these words: "I will be on time, and I expect you to be on time." Like, literally, couldn't make that up. So I'm just like, hang my head, walk by, find a seat, go through the whole class. And he's seems like a nice guy. He talks about how the class will work, talking to all of them. It seems like he knows most of them. They know each other. So I'm feeling a little lost, and what am I doing here? And then class ends, all the other students leave, and so I walk up to him, and he's a kind man, a good man, I came to learn. And he was a college basketball player, like a high level one. So he's a black-skinned man, and I don't know, he's probably maybe 50 years old or something at that point, and he was tall, and still in really good shape, and kind of imposing. And he had a certain vantage, so he could easily see this big old chip on my shoulder, which showed up like this. He was also a nice man, so he didn't say anything about the chip on the shoulder, which was great. So I walk up to him, and I say, "Yeah, Dr. Weidman, they told me in the English department that to give you this story, and that if you deem that I am worthy for this class, then you might let me in." And so he's looking at me, kind of looking down at me, and just physically, literally, and says, "Well, I'm not sure it's quite so severe as that. And yes, it would be good for me to have a sense of your writing. So why don't you leave that with me, and come to the next class next week, and then we'll talk after class again and see from there." So I'm relatively bolstered by this. One, as I vented out all my resentment and charge about the system and not being fair, and he didn't say no, right? So okay, so hey, there's a chance still. So next week I come to class. I'm there on time, right? I get there on time, and I even talk a little bit with a couple of the other students. I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable. Get to the end of class, and once again, all the other students leave. I come up to him, and this time he sits down on the edge of the desk there, so we're almost eye to eye, and he says to me, "I enjoyed your story, and there were some really good points in there, and I made some notes for you." And he hands me the story. So at that point, I'm like, "Ooh, he liked my story." And then he said, "And there are some things that need to be worked on, including your sense of story," which was very accurate. I didn't know that then, and that became a big part of my dedication to learning, and ironically became a big part of my sort of teaching and training career, is telling stories. Anyway, and then so he hands me the story, and I'm kind of waiting, like, and what else? He says, "I'll ask you a question. Do you need to get the college credit for this class?" So I look kind of puzzled. He says, "Because it seems to me that what you're here for is that you're dedicated to writing, and you want to develop your writing and get some help with that." So I say, "Yeah." He's like, "So if you don't need the college credit, then it would just be a lot easier for me. And that would mean you could come to the class and you participate just like everyone else. You would workshop a story or two, and we just wouldn't do the paperwork part of it." So I think about it for a moment, like, what would I lose out on? Am I going to go all the way through and get a Master's of Fine Arts? I'd learned the phrase by then. And I think, whatever, I want to get in the class. So I'm like, great, that's fine, yes, sure. So I walk out of there, like flying, walking on sunshine. I'm walking across the same campus I'd been on a couple other times recently, the previous times I had been feeling like a loser, intimidated kid from the wrong side of the class. And this is such a great lesson for me about state. And some of you have been with me talking about state, our state of being, our emotional state, our physical state, energetic state. Those previous times when I'd walked through the campus, my own state was something like this, feeling afraid, inadequate, and so I saw it all as intimidating and people as unfriendly. And this day, though, after I got into the class, I'm walking through the campus, and I'm just, I'm on sunshine. I'm like, a little leprechaun dance, and click my heels and all that, and awesome, right? Really excited. And then it was just as I was walking across campus, I'm kind of playing the thing over again in my mind, the conversation, and what does it mean not to get the college? Then it hits me. Hey, that means I don't have to pay, right? And because, mind you, remember, I had no idea how I was going to get the money if I got in the class. I just, knew there would be some kind of way. So I didn't have to pay, and I was in the class, right? I was so excited. And not only that, one of the things I learned, really powerful lesson, y'all know there's that expression, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right? And there's an old spiritual truism that if any student or disciple goes to a teacher or guru and says, will you teach me? The student can say no. However, and if the student disciple says 3 times, then the teacher must accept them. And I've learned over the years in my 25, 30 years now teaching career that what motivates me most, what thrills me most, is when people want to learn. Aside from the money or the qualifications, it's when there's a real desire that's so compelling. So I learned that for myself in that occasion too, because part of it was Dr. Weidman was, wanted to honor the fact that I really wanted to learn. And from that, it occurred to me like, hey, I wonder if I could do this with other classes. So then I went to another class, a graduate level literature class, and I went up to the teacher and I said, I'm not actually enrolled in the school here. I'm taking an MFA class over here. Could I sit in on your class? I'd really just love to learn from you. And I said, sure. So that started a whole nother way of getting education that was so exciting to me. And I'll tell you one more part of the story. Because while I overcame a lot and was so excited to be in there, I still was aware of, how do I want to say it? I'd been part of a writing world started by one of my great teachers and beloved friends, Pat Schneider. And she had studied with a teacher, also at UMass, called Peter Elbow, who wrote a book called Writing Without Teachers. And whereas most of us in school had learned to, I want to write something, so I make an outline, and then I write a draft, and then I fix it, and it tends to create writing that is less than alive or passionate. And oftentimes what happens in those kind of academic settings is that we present our work to a teacher and they take their red pen and kind of tell us what's wrong with it, and we tend to feel discouraged. And in the writing world, it's well known that a lot of great talent and possibility kind of gets crushed because of the criticism, because of that model. So Peter Elbow said, you know what, here's another way of doing it. And then Pat Schneider, she took that and ran and developed this whole beautiful system of writing. Later on, I became trained in that system and have led writing workshops. And it's really a beautiful system that it does have an element of feedback and criticism, though not with fresh writing. And when I first came across it, this kind of writing workshop, what she told me is, here's the way it works. We will, in the writing workshop, I'll give you prompts and little triggers and things, and you can write in response to that, or you can write anything you want for a timed period, and then it's optional to read out loud to us. And with that kind of fresh writing that you haven't edited yet or looked at, the others of us will respond only with what we love, what we remember. So when I first heard this, I thought to myself, that's pansy stuff. Come on. I need criticism. I need someone to attack it, to tell me what's wrong. But hey, I figured, why not? I'll try it out. So I got into that workshop, and I was amazed at how great it was. And this was, for me, one of the huge learnings that affected me later on as a teacher and teaching other teachers using feedback. And one of the first parts of feedback is to notice what's working, what's great, what we love. And there's always something. So I was, I had one foot in that world, but I was, kind of hardcore. And so I also wanted to do this academic thing. So, and I thought, you know what, I'm confident, I'm good, I'm not going to, my spirit won't be crushed by the academic world. About 6 weeks into the semester, it's time for me to workshop my story. So, and I brought that same story that I'd brought to Dr. Weidman. And what it means in that setting to workshop a story is you give a copy to everybody in the class. They read it. The class meets once a week for 3 hours or something. They read your story in between classes, and then the next time we sit together and people say, well, this is what I thought of your story, and this is that, and it's great. It's amazing as a writer to get that feedback. And what I had not prepared myself for. Courage, sometimes the better part of valor. How does that go? The line between courage and fear. Sometimes my boldness and courage gets me into situations, have you ever had this, where suddenly I'm like, oh, I'm over my head, this is too much. Well, that workshop, and when I got the feedback from my fellow students there, the ones that were MFA students, was what you could call a writerly bloodbath. As in, they just attacked and attacked and attacked. And, Dr. Weidman, for the most part, he moderated it and he helped a little bit. And, there were probably a couple things that people liked, but mostly it was, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is bad. I was so devastated. Like, I walked out of that class. And, I've never been one for, physical violence, although I guess my judo career was in a way like that. What it felt like is, someone had just smacked me in the face, or I'd had a bad judo throw and my face went flat on the ground. I walked out of that class, stunned. Walked across that same campus one more time, and literally, these words came in my head. Who am I to write? I will never write again. It came so clear, I suck, I have no ability to write, so clear in my head. That was it, I was done. And then, man, I feel so lucky and so blessed for whatever divine intervention, whatever inner strength my spirit had, because that lasted only for about 2 minutes. And before I got to my car, my response was, fuck them! Tell me my story sucks. And then it hit me afterwards. Oh, yeah. You know what? That was like hazing. That was like I joined a fraternity. In some way, they were attacking me in a way. An initiation. And, with a little bit of time, my righteous anger about it diminished, and I realized, okay, I felt hurt, and it's not their fault, and let's learn from this. And which is, I think one of the best philosophies we can all have with the challenges and the pains in our life, because they happen, to then ask, what can I learn from this? What can I do with this? And so then I thought, all right, my next story is going to be better. And amazingly, whether my next story was much better or not, when I brought it there, so much more positive feedback. Right? It was amazing. And lessons, perhaps, in case they're not obvious, one of my favorite lessons here is, if there's something we want, especially something we want to learn to be an effective or good student, let's let nothing get in our way, right? No matter what it is, if we remember why, our motivation for it, then we will find a way. And for me, that was such a great lesson. There were so many times in there when I just felt inadequate, and yet it was the vision of what I wanted to do. You know, I knew there was something for me with writing that pulled me forward and kept me going in the face of what I thought was criticism or doors closing. And, you know, last thing, thank you to Dr. Weidman. We haven't talked for, 30-something years. What a great man and what a great teacher. And thank you to all of the teachers out there. All right, enough said on this story. I hope it was entertaining for you. I hope it was valuable for you. If you're interested in connecting more about this or others, or joining our membership, our Sangha, awesome. And no matter what, I hope that you are using your stories to create your vibrant life. And I appreciate your interest. All right, y'all. Thank you. See you later.